Hey students, and welcome back. I am at it with another video for y'all. So what we are introing today is called our Sketchbook Submission 1. So in this course we have two sketchbook submissions. We have our first one, which will be half of the concepts covered in the course, and then the second one will be the other half of the concepts covered in the course. So I outline everything written, so I'll explain it verbally quick, but I'll keep it wrapped into a nutshell so I don't waste your time. But essentially, on this first sketchbook submission, we'll be practicing a few concepts, and those include line, value, shape, perspective, and abstraction. So if you cut this class down the middle, those are half of our concepts. And so why I do these sketchbooks is really for practice. So for each concept, let's say line, for example, we'll do 4 sketches at 15 minutes apiece. So you'll spend 1 hour total on line, 1 hour on shape, shading, perspective, etc. And that is to get you comfortable with practicing these concepts. I by no means want perfection. These are not going to be pretty. These are not going to be neat. They are a sketchbook. So I want you to be creative and explore with these. And keep in mind a few ground rules is that in total we'll need 28 sketches, and please spend 15 minutes on each sketch. You'll need to make sure you're spending that 15 minutes, and if you say, hey, I'm done, then create a background or do another one next to it. I really need those 15 minutes because I need to get your hand and brain trained to work together to coordinate those sketches. So we'll make sure to do that. And then as we move forward, keep in mind that the grading on this is very black and white. So I want you to look at the rubric. We really need these images to be 4 inches by 4 inches minimum. They can be bigger than that if you prefer. I would actually prefer them 6 by 6, but 4 by 4 is minimum, is what you'll be graded on. And then keep in mind, this sketchbook, everything will be from reference photos. So we won't be doing anything from life. And this is because a lot of these will be creative endeavors that we'll be pulling references from, some pieces here, some pieces there, and that there really isn't possible. It really isn't possible for us to be working from life at the moment. And if you hear a dog hopping up on a couch, that is my poodle Muffin. Let me show you. There is Muffin hanging out in the production studio. I am in my house in our lower living room, just hanging out with Muffin over there. Anyways, back down to earth, the topic at hand. So keep in mind you can do this either digitally or physically, and I call physically just drawing by hand, and I will have both examples of each. And for each project, and by project I mean like category, for example, line, value, shape, shading, perspective, etc. You will have 3 options, and you get 3 prompts. I call them options or prompts, and you get to choose what you do. So only pick 1 prompt for subject or category, for example, line. And within that one, you'll have to do that prompt 4 times. And make sure that that prompt, every time you do it, you change it a little bit. Maybe you change your idea, your approach, etc. But that is for you to get comfortable with that sketch and really learn and lean into it. Okay, so what I want you to do right now is pause this video, go back to Canvas if you're on YouTube right now or watching me on YouTube. Pause me right now on this face. Okay, now that that is paused, I want you to read the introduction, every word top to bottom, because I can guarantee you'll have questions. It's a lot of work, and I would like you to know exactly what you're doing. So please read through that. It's really straightforward, and I will just reiterate one time. There are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 categories or projects, you can call it. Line, value, shape, shading, perspective, and abstraction. And each category or project gets 4 sketches. And each 4 sketches are based off of either prompt A, B, or C. And you want to pick only 1 prompt under each category. So for example, if I'm working on category line, I would personally like to do prompt A. So I'm going to do prompt A 4 times. Hey folks, let's rock and roll and demo line prompt A. So I am just searching for some reference photos, and we will be using reference photos for absolutely every single part of this project. So you can see I'm on Starbucks Wi-Fi. I am just collecting some reference photos, and we need a big ramen bowl, a monocle, which is one of those little eye things, and then a hat. Okay, so I'm just placing them in my file here, and keep in mind I am doing this digital. However, you can do this however you would like. Digital is not required at all. It is just very easy for me to show you what I'm doing. So I'm sketching out very lightly in pink. If you're doing this by hand, think about using the HB pencil that comes in your kit and just be very light and gentle. So I'm blocking out the shapes here, and I am just being very creative and loose and wild with this. And do you see how I'm using my reference photos and I am not tracing? I want to reiterate, we do not want to trace. So right here, I am just drawing over my line work. If you are doing this by hand, you would simply just be pushing harder to show some more serious, darker lines. And I am just having fun with it. This is a practice sketch. You do not need this to be perfect, and we don't want it to be perfect. I am just having a silly little blob here that has a monocle eating a giant bowl of ramen, and you can see I'm adding in some detail here. Make sure to spend 15 minutes, but this is meant to be fun, loose, and fast, and I am nearing the end here. On this one, keep in mind we do not want to add any value. This is simply line. We are getting used to line and how to communicate that, and line is simply just a series of graphic information that draws your eye from point A to point B. Line is really hard to make a definition for, but that's how I like to explain it. So if you're going to add some value, eyes and mouth is fine, but let's not shade anything. We just want line work. And you can see here I'm adding some variation in line work to create depth, and not required, but totally encouraged. Okay, and just in a moment, I'm going to show you the physical version that I did. It's pretty similar. You can see I'm adding eyelashes here and some lips. I'm having fun with it. Okay, so that is my sketch. And again, same principles apply to drawing it physically. Okay, so I am going to draw this physically with my HB pencil. Okay, and I am just sketching that out loosely. Okay, do you see how light and gentle I'm being? And then the areas that I'm more confident in, I push harder. And so we don't really need to erase anything here, and we shouldn't be. Just push harder once you're more confident in that line work. You can see here I pushed really hard on that outline, and that says, hey, I'm confident in this line, and that's where we're going. And we're going to leave the little sketchy sketch lines in the background. That's totally okay. So he's eating that bowl of ramen, you can see here, and I am just going to town, adding a background. He's at a little table, his little flub is hanging on. Okay. All right, prompt B. So this will be based off of an artist. I looked at an album cover. That was me quickly Googling Danny Ocean, my favorite artist, and I imagine him having an ornate lamp, and that ornate lamp would probably have a modern touch to it. So I'm putting in my reference photos. And again, if you're doing this by hand, simply put your reference photos on a computer and set them to the left or right of your sketch pad. And right here, I am loosely sketching out what I want this to look like. And if you're doing this by hand, this would simply just be a very light HB pencil. Okay? And right now, I am adding detail. I'm adding a very ornate lamp that I designed. In here, we don't want any value. We just want line work. So I am sketching that out, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. And you can see here I'm getting ornate and detailed. And again, this is done digitally, right? But the same exact principles apply to the physical version. So I want you to know that really this would turn out the same if I were to draw it by hand. It just gives you a really good view of what I'm doing, because it's just so hard to teach drawing online and show that overhead view because my hand's in the way. Okay, so I am adding that, adding some detail, having fun, a jolly old time, going to town here. And you can see my lighter lines in the background, I am just simply drawing over, and if I'm more confident, I push a little harder, add a little more detail, and have more fun with it. And then I am adding a globe on the top. I think that would be fun, kind of a a spooky little moment here with an Edison bulb, and I am nearing the end. And make sure to spend 15 minutes on each sketch. And right here in particular, I am adding more detail so I can meet that 15-minute mark. Okay. All right. And then after this one, I will have a physical example as well, and that should be queued up in just a second. So once that arrives, I will walk you through that same process. It will be very similar, but that video will just be of a physical vantage point. Okay, so it looks like that one is finished up, and I am just admiring it. Okay, all right, let's rock and roll on the physical one. Okay, I am just getting my pencils together, and there I am, and I am sketching out a lamp. This again is for Danny Ocean, but I am doing something that is more contemporary. My background is a design. I absolutely love to design, but do you see here how I sketched out just very simply? And do you see how loose I'm being here? You'll notice my line work doesn't perfectly hit the edge of my lamp. It overlaps it quite a bit. That is totally okay. We want to be loose here. We do not want to be super technical. We want to have fun. So I want you to throw all technical abilities to the wind here and just have fun. We want to instill confidence. We want to be bold. We want to be brave. And we do not want to be nitpicky here. So you can see I have a very ornate little lamp I drew. Super cool. Alrighty. So next one is related to cowboy hats. So I am going to show you some cowboy hats that I am picking out. And then I'm picking out a megaphone to go on top of it. And if you read the prompt, you'll know exactly why. And then I am just setting up my reference images. And keep in mind, if you're doing this by hand or a physical version, you would just simply have them on a computer or iPad or even print it out to your left. Okay? And as a friendly reminder, make sure to not trace anything. That does not help us. We are here to learn and observe. So you can see here I am blocking out shapes. And I blocked out shapes. My preference is always to use pink before I go in with my final lines when I'm working digitally. I've always done it. You may have a different process, but you can see here I simply just block out those shapes, and once I'm more confident, I create a new layer and I push harder. And keep in mind, if you are doing this physically, you would simply just be pushing harder instead of creating a new layer. And I'm adding some ornamentation here and adding a little gem. Then I think I even add a feather in a little bit. And then a megaphone eventually will go on top, but I am having fun. And the point of this one right here is just line work. We do not want any shading. We don't want value. We don't want shadow. We just want this to communicate line. We are getting the basics down, and line really is the introduction to drawing. And we do not need super crisp lines. You can see here I am pretty worried about crisp lines, but you do you. If you want it more loose, I am totally fine with that. And with this whole process, I want you to take a deep breath and know that whatever you produce, if you're learning from it, that is all that matters to me. If you think, hey, these sketches aren't that good, I really don't care. This is for your practice, and I want you to be spending the minimum allotted time on it. And so if you are, hey, this isn't really good, don't worry about it. We are here to get better in practice, and there is no pressure on perfection. So I want you to just simply do your best. Okay, I am adding some more detail, okay, and it looks like I am switching to the analog version. And again, same exact principles apply, and that will always be the case in this class if I show you a demo on my iPad. I will sometimes show it in person, but the reality is that the concepts are really the exact same. It's just drawing digitally is more my speed. I do it more often. And in this class, whenever we do a sketchbook submission, if you want to do it fully digital, that is totally fine by me. But keep in mind, when we do our bigger projects, those need to be done in the assigned medium. Okay, I am just adding some detail here, some little gems on the cowboy hat. I think I go in and I add little pearl bead things. And then I may even get a little crazy and add in some more detail. But the point here, make sure to get those 15 minutes in. That is so important. And you can do that by adding a ton of detail. And it's actually pretty fun, very soothing. And so I am adding these little beads here. I don't really know who JoJo Siwa is, but I know she's all over the news, and she wears a baseball cap that has this, so that is inspired by that. I know she has a new music video that a lot of people don't like, but anyways, JoJo Siwa, I guess, apparently some child dance star that now sings, whatever, but that's where I got that idea from. And I am just adding detail, having fun with it. These little bead things towards the end, and then some sort of silly little line design that hugs the hat and comes in, and it's just fun. So this sketch, the reason I picked a cowboy hat is because it has a lot of curve and contour to it, and it's really good for beginning artists. Most of you, though, are quite experienced, but in terms of beginning drawing, that's what that is. All right, on to value. So value can be classified as the difference between light and dark and that shade between. So if we have a smooth shade in between, we call that chiaroscuro, and that is the soft transition from jet black to a lighter tone. And right here, what we're doing in this prompt is we're creating about 5 or so pine trees, and then those pine trees will all have different values. And the value is very intentional here. What we're doing at that value is that the things that are closest to us, we'll call foreground, will appear as dark. And then the things that are in the back will be much lighter. And the items that are in the middle will be grayish. So here I am mapping out my trees. Again, this is digital, but the same exact concepts apply. Once I have these trees mapped out, I will start adding color. And that color will be in black and white or value. And so you can see the trees closest to us are black. Ones a little further away are gray. Ones even a little more further away are lighter gray. And the ones way back there are light. And this is a great exercise for value. And one thing I want you to remember is there is no shading here. We don't have any variation in the value. It is just one solid tone of value. And always, always, always make sure to ground your image. You can see I added some playful lines below. We don't want those trees floating. So if you ever have an item you're sketching in my class, please always make sure to ground that. Here I'm doing the same principles, okay? I'm grounding that, and then I have a pack of pencils, and these pencils come in different values. So the higher the value, 8B, I'm using there, the darker and greasier it's going to be. And I'm just going to push very hard, and I'm going to get those tones and values in. And one thing that I want you to keep in mind as you're moving forward is that these pencils you have are super cool. They have different values to them. And if you look at them, the higher the number, like I said, the darker the value. And this is a great opportunity to use that. And you can see here, I am actually not going with that advice, and I am just pushing lighter on this. Either work. And one thing I want you to know is you do not need to be using a pencil for this. If you want to crosshatch or if you want to do hatching, that's fine. As long as you are getting that value across, I am totally okay with it. We'll cover those concepts later, but I am just having fun with it right here and getting those values in. Okay, I'm nearing the end of this one. When I was a college student, I did a whole entire huge drawing out of 8B pencil. And if you're familiar with 8B pencil, it is actually quite exhausting to work with because it's so thick and hard. Okay. I think I even come back and I outline these for more clarity. Totally up to you. You have freedom here. I want you to draw what makes you happy. Please, again, follow the guidelines that I have written on Canvas and also in this video. But if you need to make small tweaks, keep in mind that is totally fine. You're the artist here. Okay. And we are going to mosey on over onto the next one. So this one, again, is a value exercise. And I really like to do this one because it's clean cut and it lends itself really well to my graphic design students who have an interest in more abstract art. So I am just drawing this out. If you're doing this via paper, same exact thing. Okay, and I am just drawing this out and trying to pick a good line weight. I'm drawing that paper airplane, and friendly reminder, I am not tracing. I am simply referring to my reference photo. We don't need to trace. That absolutely does nothing for us. And if we trace, we're actually shorting ourselves, because when we are looking at the reference photo, we are studying the object and learning more about it. The slight nuances, the different shapes, how it folds, how it hits the light, etc. It really is a study and understanding what you're looking at, even if it's a photo. Okay, I am just getting that line work in, making sure I'm happy with it. And feel free to erase if needed, if you're not getting the results you need, because nothing will be perfect the first go around, and frankly, nothing will be perfect when you're done with it. But I am assigning a value, and this value will be in black and white, to a different plane of each one. You can see here, and by plane I mean like portion or shape of it, a triangle. And that's up to you how you want to do that. There really isn't any rules here, but we want it as one tone per little shape. Moving on to value prompt C, I am drawing a couch, and I'm going to take an interesting approach here. We want to make sure that on this couch we are not shading. Instead, we are adding value in fields, almost like a coloring book. When you're coloring in a coloring book, we want to make sure, well, it depends, but we just want one tone per shape, okay? And I'll explain that as we get further, but I am drawing a couch. This sort of is an axonometric view. You do not need to do this. This is just my little architect brain. This is what makes me happy, what I enjoy, and I am sketching out a very basic couch. And if you're doing this by hand, same principles apply. And then you could use an HB pencil, and if you use that HB pencil, when you're drawing your different fields or regions of tones, just push harder to get that darker value. Okay. And right here, I'm just editing a few things. I am rounding the corners, making it a little designy. That's my inner architect. Okay. Rounding the top. And then I want different portions to be different tones, almost like a diagram so it reads better. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to trace over my line work, solidify what I need. Okay. So that is looking good so far. This is a little disorientating looking back at it. Okay. All right. So once this finishes up, I will start to add my value. And I am going to just assign different values to each one just to visually show us that those are different parts of the couch. There really isn't any rhyme or reason here. Just keep it in black and white and make sure that each plane or surface of the couch, if it's at a different angle, has a different tone to it, like I've shown here. And I am just going through and cleaning things up. Okay. And then once that is done, we will be moseying on over to the next portion, and we will actually be nearing the end of this exercise. So thank you so much for your patience in going through all these videos and watching it. I really appreciate it. Okay, and there we go. That is that. The next step, we are going to go into shape. And so shape is a little different from line because this is where the complexity gets in the line work, and we have to be more aware of what we're drawing in proportion. The reason I pick a beagle is because a beagle has a lot of key strokes on its face that help us with proportion. So you can see here, I block out one ear, then I block out the face, and then I block out the other ear. And do you notice, if you go back a couple seconds, you'll see how I actually drew on the beagle's face to understand the shape of his face. I want you to do that. Whether you do that with your brain and finger, just tracing over your computer screen, I want you to really understand that shape. And all we can do is just break things down by shape to understand proportion. And here, this isn't a complete exercise on proportion. We are just getting to the tip of the iceberg, really. But with that, I want you to physically take your pencil and look at your image and trace over it and say, oh, okay, so that's the shape I need to be drawing. So let's draw what we see, not what we think. So we want to be very analytical and draw what's in front of us. We don't want our brain to warp what's there. And you can see I have other elements I'm adding. So the requirement for this prompt, again, make sure to read all the prompts before this video, is you're creating a logo for a team of beagles that play frisbee golf. So those eyes are a little creepy, so I redid those. Then I added a little frisbee golf chain thing, whatever it's called. I'm sure it has some technical term. And those are the beagles playing frisbee golf. Okay. All right. So I am going to move on to prompt B shortly. That's looking pretty good. Okay, let's rock and roll on to prompt B. So the thing I really like about prompt B is that there's a lot of room for creativity in this one. So we are designing a logo for a soda shop. I'm calling mine Pop Culture. You can do whatever you like, but the goal here is to work on line work and shape. I am working on proportion and scale here. You do not need to do that. This is just a method that works for me. I like to line things out. So if you want to use graph paper for this, you're more than welcome to. Or you can just really be creative and develop a logo. You do not at all need to do it like this. This is just simply practice to get you used to sketching, drawing, and having fun with it. And you can see, hey, Aaron, why are you using pink lines? I really don't know. I've always done it. When I start a project, I always use this hot pink line. And then when I am more finalized, I will trace over it with black. But if I were to do this physically, I simply would just use an HB pencil. That's my weapon of choice. I love to use it. And the reason I love that HB is because I can push super light. And then when I'm confident in my line work, I can push hard. HB is just my ride or die. It's what I enjoy. It's one of my favorite mediums. Okay, prompt C. So most of this actually was not saved on my iPad, so I'm going back and just showing you how I did this. I started with some very simple outlines, and then I have my reference photos here. For prompt C, it is simply just a frog riding a tricycle, hyped up on sugar with a birthday hat. I have my rough sketch here in pink, and then once I am feeling more confident in that line work, I go back over it later with a black line in Procreate. And again, if you're doing this by hand, you would just be pushing harder with your pencil. I don't necessarily want you to erase lines you've made. There really is no need because this is not a presentation drawing. This is more for fun and practice. And there's my silly little guy screaming woohoo at a birthday party, hyped up on sugar on his tricycle. Very fun one. Okay, so the next one for the shading prompt A, there's a few animals to choose from. There's actually quite a bit to go through here, but I want to show you, I'm simply sketching this out, and then I'm going in with my pencil. You can use an HB pencil if you're doing it physically. There's my sketch. That would be an HB pencil if you're doing it by hand. And then I go in and I am just adding shading where necessary. And make sure that when you're doing these exercises with shading, that if something is black in your reference photo, that you do draw it as black. We want those values to be punchy. Okay, so that first one was a capybara, and this one right here is a Polaroid camera. I'm sketching that out. Again, I'm using pink lines here, but if you're doing this by hand, this would simply just be an HB pencil. And once you are more confident, draw darker, but in this stage, draw very, very, very lightly, okay? We do not want this to be dark because then it will show up. We are just trying to get her bearings here and understand what's going on. And if you notice, I'm not tracing. I'm referencing my reference photo. That's why it's called the reference photo. And that is helping me understand scale, proportion, how things are looking. And one thing I want you to keep in mind if your proportion is looking whack is, okay, so that front part of the camera is about roughly the same length as the back side, okay? And then my width of my camera compared to my height is probably about 1.5 times my width. So doing little mind exercises like that help us map out how big things are with sizes. So you can always think, okay, my width is about such and such compared to my height, and you can apply that principle to literally any part of the drawing. And so now that I have my shading started, I am going through, my shading drawing started, I'm going through and I am just finalizing things. And then you can see here, I am just coloring in with different values, and these values will be in black and white, and they'll be from black all the way to white, and every value in between. Okay, and right here with shading, I'm going beyond just simple fields of values, and I am combining different values within the same planes. You can see here, particularly towards the end, I am getting in that little crease of the camera where it hits the table. So this is getting wrapped up. I am just putting a bow on it, getting all my values in there. And feel free to use any medium that comes in your kit. I'm fine if you want to use charcoal. Just warning, it will be incredibly messy. I would like you to use that kit of pencils you have with the different values. That would work just fine for that. But ultimately, you choose what works best for you. Okay, so the next one we have is a flash tattoo idea, and this is our last prompt in the series. And I want you to pick the best prompt that works for you. And I am just blocking out my shapes. Do you see how I traced out the sizes and scales of proportion of the fish? This is not rocket science. This is simply just years of practice and being able to look at something and be able to draw it. So I want you to know that, hey, mine isn't turning out like this. That is okay. This is simply practice. This is a sketchbook. We are not looking for perfection and never will be. I simply just want to see effort on your behalf and that you're putting in those 15 minutes per sketch. And one thing I want you to think of when you are adding value to a sketch is turn your image into black and white, your reference photo, or I know you can't turn your brain into black and white visually, but think of looking at an item as in black and white. And if you squint at the item with your eyes, squint kind of hard, you'll notice the blobs of different value. So that's what I always do. I've been doing that for the past 20 years. It's really how I see things, and it's easy for me to find value. So I have this adorable little fish. Let's call her Reba, like the singer Reba McEntire, and I'm just finishing that up, and we will move on. And again, make sure to always get in black, jet blacks into your drawings. It makes it pop so much. And this thing is just screaming now. And I add, make sure to ground your object. I add some waves in the background. And this is the portion of the video where we transition into perspective. So I gave you a few options. I am not going to demo each prompt because they all are pretty similar, but I want you to find a home or a piece of architecture from one of those architects, and I want you to draw it from that reference photo. And we are just training our eye to see different shapes and how that perspective works. Our second project in the course will be perspective, but this is just a small warm-up. So if you see, I started with that horizon line, and I got that locked in. And you can either do an interior or exterior shot. That's totally fine. But here, I want to match the angles. Do you see how I traced over that image to get that angle right? And that just helped my brain realize, okay, that's the angle I need to be drawing at. And if you are not doing this digitally, just simply take your finger on your computer screen and trace over that angle. And that'll tell your brain, hey, okay, my line on my page needs to be at this angle. And that's simply all I'm doing here. I'm just taking those big images, those big lines, and I'm just tracing over it on my reference photo, and then I'm just drawing it on my actual drawing. And yeah, again, super easy to do by hand as well. Just simply trace with your finger or the eraser end of your pencil on the computer screen. And I'm adding some texture here. Keep in mind, we do not want any shade, shadow, value, simply line work. And this can be super loose. Mine is pretty loose. I'm just moving a few things around, making sure that it matches my photo. And this is simply just an exercise in drawing what we're seeing. Okay? And I have a very fun sketch I made, and I'm just going to turn that to black. And I'm adding people with their heads on the horizon line. And there's a little sketch of one of my favorite buildings ever. Okay. All right. Our final drawing will be experimentation, and this will be what we call a blind contour drawing. So I would like you to find a reference photo of someone either standing, sitting, or walking, etc. I have examples in the prompt, so go ahead and pick a prompt. I won't be doing each prompt here just because they're all so similar, but I want you to do a blind contour drawing where you do not lift your pencil and you do not look at your page. This is a study. The purpose of this is to get your eyes to study the object and your hand to do the work for you. And if the objects don't line up on your page, we don't care. This is a chance for your brain to get into every nook and cranny of that item and observe. So I want your eyes to be on that reference photo, and I want your hand to be constantly moving, and do not look down at your hand. I just want your eyes bouncing around that image, drawing it, and then your hand constantly moving. And these are fun, they're very experimental. Okay, so I am just Googling quick the purpose, and you'll see here I'm just showing it is a thing people do. A lot of people are surprised to hear that, but it is pretty powerful, and a lot of art teachers will use that. Okay, if you have any questions, reach out anytime, and thank you so much for bearing with me on this long video, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much.